All right, so I feel like there's a huge just like worry, concern, misunderstanding on what is going on with the housing market. Is there a crash coming? Blah, 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 blah. And I want to give you the rundown as somebody who does financing day to day with people who are buying homes this year. Okay, so just to clarify, I personally specialize on the East Coast, and these 5 latest contracts that I have helped are 2 in North Carolina, 1 in South Carolina, 1 in Tennessee, 1 in Florida. Actually, just kidding, 1 in Georgia as well, 6. Every single one of these, we have received max seller credit on these contracts. I want to kind of walk through why that's happening. I'm going to dig into specifically what is going on with home prices. Also, I saw a video on here earlier. It's very clickbaity and a little false, but it was basically saying there's like 32 out of 50 states where home prices are dropping. So just to quickly clarify, it's not completely true. What it does show right now from a state level is that 27 out of 50 states have had a monthly decline in home values, but that doesn't actually indicate for the entire year. I will say though, if your state is seeing a monthly drop in pricing, this is the time for you to take action before we start to see a huge amount of people jump back into the home buying process. I will also say this is interesting though. So for those of you that live in or around metro areas, we're seeing roughly 1 in 4 large metros are seeing prices fall, which is pretty substantial. I'm going to run through some East Coast states that I specifically cover, and I'm going to explain like how this information is actually really critical into why most of my clients right now are getting their closing costs covered. So first of all, I am licensed in Florida. Florida has actually been hit the hardest statewide, with the median price dropping about 1.7% year over year. Obviously, you're going to see like different pockets have different drop rates, but so Tampa specifically saw declines around 4 to 5%. Orlando, Jacksonville, Miami are all dipping by 2 to 3% annually. And then you mix that in with like rates aren't the cheapest right now. And so a lot of those homes in those markets are really struggling to sell. So specifically in Florida, what we're seeing is that there are more active listings. There are also longer market times. And then there are aggressive price cuts happening because they're not moving. Okay, let's talk about Georgia. So statewide, home values are down about 1.3% year over year. That's pretty huge. Also specifically, if you live in or near the metro Atlanta area, this is a really stagnant buyer's market. So like this is actually a huge advantage for you if you were looking to buy, because that means that sellers right now, they are putting up their homes on the market, they're sitting on the market, and they're just not getting the same activity that they once saw. That is also because a large amount of new build and new construction, new development happened. And so now we've seen a slowdown in buyers, right? Which then often means that we start to see a surplus of inventory. And when there are more homes available than there are people to buy them, sellers and builders start to panic. And so then they start to drop the price point. Once again, the headline sounds scary, but as a buyer, this is really a strong time for you to be able to A, get a home that has been lowered in price because it's not seeing movement, but B, and this is a huge one, and one reason why most of my clients right now are getting their closing costs covered, is that you have way more negotiation power when you are in a market that they are seeing a struggle and that homes are listed for longer than obviously they would want. Okay, so I personally live in North Carolina. So interesting, statewide, North Carolina actually is nearly flat. So like there's like a negative 0.1% change year over year, which is like really minimal. Now there's some nuance here with different like pockets having growth over not, but in general, so metro activity specifically, homes are lingering longer on the market. Y'all, they're sitting, metro areas, think like Charlotte, Raleigh. And I would also say specifically, this is existing homes, not new construction. I will say this time and time again, new construction, sometimes you can get like they run big incentives, but I've also talked with people who are buying new construction and the neighborhood is on a wait list. And so there really are no incentives at all. But so specifically for those of you who are buying or interested in buying existing homes on the market, so like it says on average, metro areas in North Carolina, homes are sitting on the market for 63 days, okay? And listings show price reductions. Again, 2 things that as a buyer, you want to take advantage of. A, buying when you are seeing drops happen, because it means that you probably can also put in an offer that is less than the list price. But the other element is when a home sits on the market for at least 30 days, you are very likely to get seller credit. When the home sits on the market for 60 days, I'm not obviously going to say it's guaranteed, but I've not yet seen a contract come through with my clients where the home has been sitting on the market for more than 60 days and they are not getting all of their closing costs, in theory, paid for. All right, so South Carolina, which is also one of my licensed states. So actually median sales price statewide, okay, have gone up by 1.6%. So we're not seeing a huge drop there. With that being said, though, homes are lingering on average for 66 days on the market in South Carolina. Once again, that is a huge, huge indicator that you are going to have your closing costs covered. Okay, so in Charleston, we're seeing just a modest drops, nothing big. But Greenville and Columbia, essentially we are looking at -1 to like -0.4 decline. Myrtle Beach and Florence, we're seeing projections to fall by 1 to 1.4%. So specifically in Greenville, just as an example, listings have jumped over 18% year over year, which again means there's more available to buy. There's not as many buyers on the market. So then for you as a buyer, this gives you a lot of negotiation power. So in South Carolina, technically we're still seeing some growth overall, but momentum is cooling in big metros, specifically in places like Charleston, Greenville, and Columbia. So keep that in mind. All right, let's talk about Tennessee, which is another one of the states that I cover. So average home value has still gone up slightly, 0.4% in the past year. However, overall in the state, we're seeing market cooling, which is again, growth is stabilizing and inventory is starting to increase. What we are seeing, so specifically for metros, so Nashville, we've seen that prices are actually down 0.2 to 0.6 year over year. So again, if you're in Nashville and you're looking to buy, we are seeing prices go down. Buyers in Knoxville, so if you're in Knoxville, so there we're still seeing a bit of an increase, so about 0.8% up in pricing year over year. Market in Knoxville actually remains fairly like healthy, so right now days on market are only about 12, so I'd say like Knoxville, if you're in that area, maybe a little bit harder to get hardcore seller concessions because that's not a ton. But big picture for Tennessee, we're seeing that the growth is mild. We're seeing Nashville sliding into a buyer favoring market. So again, that's where you're able to negotiate on price, on getting your closing costs covered, etc. Knoxville is we're not totally there yet. It's not totally a buyer's market there just yet. Okay, last one. Let's talk about Virginia, also another one of my states. So Virginia, we're actually still seeing like statewide that pricing, like value is still going up by about 2 to 2.5% year over year. Inventory though is up about 20 to 35%. So what we're seeing statewide is that we're seeing some slight cooling, but still upward momentum. So like I would say this is actually still more of like a healthy market, not like totally a buyer's market. Still doesn't mean that you can't pay attention to homes that are sitting on the market for longer, right? And then take advantage of those. Obviously, y'all, this is always very dependent on the specific state and county and town that you're living in or wanting to buy in. One thing that I do very, very, very closely with all of my clients is like we run scenarios. So every single client that I work with, we run a pricing scenario. I show you if you purchase this home at this price and you get no seller credit, here's what this is going to look like monthly. What is this going to look like for your cash to close. If you buy this house and they give you full seller credit, this is what the monthly is going to be. This is what your cash to close is going to be. Within that too, we can play around with like, what do you want to do with the rate? I think y'all know if you're new here, I'm not totally in love with like massive spending on rate buy downs at the moment because I do think that we're going to see some cooling happen over the next 6 to 12 months. That's just my opinion. However, there is totally times where your seller is actually willing to give you more than your closing costs. So closing costs would be all of like your admin fees, taxes, etc., and also all of your prepaids, which is homeowners insurance, property tax, if you have to do any funding for an HOA, all of that. And so sometimes you actually have, like I have a client right now, their seller credit was actually more than all of their closing costs. So we did do a rate buy down in that scenario that then is added into like your admin fees. And then in theory, the seller actually paid for them to have a lower rate. So if you are looking to buy on the East Coast this year and you are paying attention to what's going on, I would love to support you because ultimately this is going to be very personal and it really depends on what part of the country you are looking to live in and literally what city you are specifically looking at. So if you want to run numbers, link on my profile, the very first form, pop in your info. I will send you a text and let's have a chat. All right. See you guys soon.